Harry looked around. One thing was certain. Of all the teachers' offices Harry had visited so far this year, Dumbledore's was by far the most interesting. If he hadn't... What? Oh, we're rolling? Sorry. Hello, International Relations class. Dr. Maiden here. Sorry, I was a little distracted there, trying to keep myself busy rereading Harry Potter over my spring break. I'm going to be bringing you a lecture today, Intro to IR 4.1. This is us transitioning from international security into the realm of economic security, and the lecture today is going to be titled Money, Power, and Security. Okay, so let's start with this statement. Money is power. We've probably heard this before, right? Money is power. Hit me up in the comments below. Do you agree or disagree with this, and why? Money is power. One other thing we could do is ask a question: what can money buy in the international system that states might want? Okay, is there a way that money can buy you power? If money isn't power, can it buy you power? So there's a couple of things we can think about here in terms of why states want money, why they want more and more and more money, and how that either translates immediately to power or how they can use that money to buy them power. So a couple of things we could think of is something like money buying you military power. You need money to invest in new military technologies. You need money to provide food and clothing, housing, training for troops. Militaries are very expensive. So unless you have money, you will not have military power because you can't have one without the other. Okay? You can also think of things like influence. Money being able to buy you influence with other states, with international organizations. Think of something like from the previous lecture that we did, we were talking about IOs. Think about the status of the US in organizations like the World Bank, like the WTO. Remember, we talked about how they had a weighted voting system so that the amount of money you can put behind your name translates directly to the amount of influence you have in an organization, the voting power you have in an organization. So money can buy you influence, which can be a form of power. Also, just in general, money being able to buy you relationships, being able to help you encourage integration, economic integration within the global market. We're going to unpack all of these different things here throughout the next couple of lectures. Money buying military power, money buying influence, money buying and solidifying relationships, and encouraging integration. Okay, so if we think about it right now, markets and governments. How can we describe the relationship between markets and their governments? The book argues that this is a very tense relationship. There is a very tense relationship between markets and governments, and at the same time, a weirdly symbiotic relationship. Markets need states and states need markets, whether they want to need each other or not. So a couple of examples we can think of is something like territorial borders. We've been talking ad nauseum about territorial borders, right? We talk about the Westphalian state system. Territory is that first one, territory, sovereignty, autonomy. And so territorial borders, good for states. States want them, they're trying to control them. Kind of bad for trade, right? State borders hinder trade. If you've got long lines of people waiting to do border crossings, they've got goods in trucks that are just sitting there waiting to cross over so that they can be distributed where people might need them. Okay, so territorial borders can be good for states but bad for trade. But you can also think of something like property ownership laws. Okay, so governments can do a lot to protect businesses with things like you can own property, you can own the land that your business is on, you can own trademarks to the equipment that you are producing, things like that. So the government can protect you. It can protect businesses. It can protect invention. You know, the government can help business in that sense. The government has also done, or many governments have done over time, things like opening new markets, often forcibly. I have that on the slide, forcibly opening new markets. The US has done this quite a bit throughout history. forcing states to open trade to them, states that were previously closed or did not want to have the type of trade relationship that they had. A classic example would be something like Japan. The U.S. going into Japan while it was, the term we use is sakoku, right? A closed society, a sakoku society. The U.S. went in, opened up Japan, forced them to stop that policy of not allowing any foreign intervention or any foreign trade within the country. The U.S. has also had a lot of action doing this through the World Trade Organization, right? So previously the GATT and now the World Trade Organization. Essentially, if you want that most favored nation status, if you want the best tariff rates, if you want the best tax rates, you have to engage globally through this system. And states are going to force you to do that. States are the players within these organizations, and yet what states are doing are leveraging the best options for their businesses within their states. Okay, so we can see here a very symbiotic relationship between states and businesses. So we're going to walk through here actually with this video we're going to focus on two. We're going to do these three eras of the world economy, focusing on two for this lecture. We'll hit the other one pretty hard in the next lecture. So the book breaks it down that within these three eras you have 1648 with the start of the Westphalian system. We call this the national economy era. 1648 to around 1850, okay, so early 19th century. National economy era. The next phase then, starting 1850, going all the way up into the 1970s, we call this the international economy era. And the final one here, 1975 to the present, the era of the economy that we are currently in, we've transitioned from international and we are now in more of a global economy era. All right, so we're going to walk through these first two, national economy, international economy, and take a look at them and see how transitions between the way markets and states behave throughout these two phases have led us to the point where we're at today. Okay, so before we take a quick break, I am going to share with you some of the things that I have been doing on my spring break while my son and I have been in quarantine. We've been making some art, all right? So he is obsessed with the Lion King, and so we've got lots of Lion King pictures here that I can show you. I'm going to start with one that he did. Ooh. Oh, it's beautiful, isn't it? Yes. So this is Simba running away. Okay? And here's Nala and Simba in the elephant graveyard. All right? Pretty scary. The hyena is about to come. That's his favorite animal in the universe, by the way, hyena. Right? So I was looking for one that I wanted to color, and I saw this picture and became very concerned about why they would even put it in a children's coloring book, because it seemed pretty morbid to have this as a picture option for a child. This is Mufasa moments before his murder. And so they included this in the coloring book, and I realized, you know what? That's the one that I want to color. This is the one that I feel like is speaking to me the most. I am considering this a self-portrait. I don't know, maybe you can relate. So the cliff face is my life at this moment, attempting to be a professor and transition all these classes to online. I am Mufasa, and all these wildebeests over here threatening to trample me to death are life and current events and being a stay-at-home parent suddenly, inexplicably. I'm doing the best I can, y'all. And I'm sure that you are probably feeling the same way. We're all just doing the best we can. So make like Mufasa and just hang on for dear life. All right? We'll be right back together. Okay, so let's start with the national economy era. The national economy era, 1648 to 1815. This era of the market and states working together or not working together is defined by two things. It's defined by, first, a very strong phase of mercantilism, and then a second, very strong, if not stronger, phase of colonialism. Okay, so mercantilism. You've maybe heard this term before, maybe not. I'm going to give you the book definition here. Mercantilism is where the government uses its power, including military power, to enhance private businesses. And private businesses provide revenues to the government. Okay, so it's a very, when we're talking about the symbiotic aspect, right? A symbiotic relationship. This is where governments use everything in their power, including their military force, to enhance private businesses. So you can imagine something like the British government, the British Empire, engaging their navy vessels to participate in trade, to protect trading vessels, to scour the high seas, attacking other vessels, Spanish vessels, what have you, to stop them from attacking their mercantile enterprises. Okay, so mercantilism is this idea of a government being very hands-on, aggressively protecting its own interests, even so far as using military force to promote its own businesses. All right. The second thing we can talk about then is colonialism. So you had a transition from mercantilism into colonialism. And this is the idea that when one country takes over another country and administers it with a local bureaucracy. So what you typically have develop is within colonial systems, there will be a metropole. So in the case of, again, the British example, the British Empire, the metropole, you think of this as like the mother city of the empire. So the metropole would be London. In the case of Portugal, you could think of something like Lisbon, okay? So within the colonial system, you're having a transition, and I know we've talked about this before in class. In the colonial system, you're having a transition to, all right, if we're playing this game of money is power, money will allow me to improve my military. My military, because I'm in a mercantilist system, my military is what is helping to support my economic trade endeavors and my ability to get access to raw materials, raw resources. So I am going to engage in colonization so that I can expand not only, we talked about this, right? Not only my access to these resources, but I have to expand my tax base. I have to have more people to tax because the taxes are what will help me pay for the expansions that I need to do. All right. The reason this is called the national economy era is because most economic activity was occurring within states, not across states. It was states working in their own self-interest, a very realist world here, states working in their own self-interest for their own survival, doing what they need to do to, in the case of these empires, grow bigger and bigger and bigger, build out that tax base, get access to all the resources that I need so that I don't have to crawl to France and ask them for some resource. I have access to everything I need on my own. Okay, so that's the national economy era. We can transition then, starting 1850 to 1975, we transition into what we call the international economy era. So this is a massive shift from mercantilism and colonialism into what defines the international economy era: free trade, liberalism, and interestingly, Marxism also emerging at this time. So free trade replaced mercantilism at this time due to two key strategies. So the first one is this term absolute advantage. Absolute advantage. And this is when a country is more efficient at producing a single good than other countries. So you can think of something like Japan with rice. Japan has an absolute, or had and sort of continues to have an absolute advantage that they are just really, really good at growing rice. They have a great geography for it. They get the rain that they need. They have the irrigation capabilities that they need. They're really good at it. So they had an absolute advantage in growing rice. You can think of something else like the state of Kentucky having an absolute advantage in mining coal. We have coal. A state like Florida is not ever going to be able to surpass Kentucky's ability to mine coal. We have it. We can really dial in on that thing, go all in and say our economy here in Kentucky is supported by coal, as opposed to Florida that has to go another way. They can't do coal, right? So what emerged from this idea of let's begin to think about what our absolute advantage is this transitioned into a comparative advantage model. So a comparative advantage model of free trade is that when you are more efficient at producing, say, this one good or service, compared to other goods and services. All countries will benefit if they can specialize in trading for the things they need with that one thing that they're good at. So back to the Japan example, let's grow rice. Let's grow rice, more rice than we could ever eat in a lifetime. And then we will trade that rice for other things that we need. We'll trade it for bananas. We'll trade it for furniture. We'll trade it for beef. Whatever the things are that we need to import in, we will use our comparative advantage in rice, and we will trade for what we need. So this idea of free trade, this liberalism of let's all hone in, let's all find out something we're good at and dive in, this really became a dominant strategy during this period of time, 1815 to 1975. And it was helped along very much by, thinking 1815, the Industrial Revolution. All right, so during the Industrial Revolution, you had this transition of many of the world's states from agricultural economic systems to ones based in industry. So if we go back to the comparative advantage model, what you're seeing here is something very unique emerging where, okay, well, if we're going to go all in with this comparative advantage model, we're already starting at a little bit different playing field, because a country like UK can say, our new comparative advantage is cotton. We are going to dive all in with textiles. We are going to have the whole country be textile manufacturing, light manufacturing, and we are just going to make cotton. And so we're going to force all of our colonies to grow cotton. So here we go, this comparative advantage, right? It's this idea of, okay, well, here we are in a country like Syria, Egypt. You'd probably be good at growing cotton. The US, the South in the US, we are going to force you to grow cotton, and that's going to be your comparative advantage thing. That's what you're going to be best at. Meanwhile, we will transition to something at a higher level. We're transitioning away from this agrarian cotton growing enterprise into light manufacturing of textiles. And from there, our economy will grow leaps and bounds above yours, and we'll transition into something else. In the case of the US, we transition into things like automobiles, okay? And then we can transition from there into things like smartphones. So while we keep ratcheting up and moving up the ladder into more and more specialized things, we are still going to be relying on countries in other parts of the world to keep doing those other things that we need, like you need to grow the corn, you need to grow the rice, you need to grow the beef, because we're all going to eat that, even though we are not engaging in that anymore because of this comparative advantage system. So I know I've talked about, in another class, we're kind of dovetailing topics here, the idea that this benefits some at the expense of others, absolutely. And so from our Marxism lecture, we can see where this doesn't sit well with people. The comparative advantage model inherently creates a system where some states get to benefit at the expense of others. Some people within states get to benefit at the expense of others. So by the late 1800s, you had the UK suffering economically as countries like the US, Germany, France started pursuing more protectionist policies, and you saw the emergence not only of Marxism as kind of this alternative to the model, that it's like, we're attempting this thing, this free trade thing, where we're going to have liberalism, free trade, comparative advantage, absolute advantage, and we're going to put all our eggs into that basket. But countries like the UK realized, this is not working out for us the way that we expected it to. We are losing comparatively to other countries that are much bigger, that have much bigger populations, that have more than one thing that they can have a comparative advantage in. That became really tough. And so markets went through this phase of kind of a greedy phase of, instead of saying, hey, free trade will allow us all to prosper, countries like the US and Germany and France started closing their markets to foreign trade because they realized we can do this all on our own. We have enough here that we can support ourselves, we can trade within our own countries, we have enough of a market here, we'll be okay. That really hurt countries like the United Kingdom. So competition was increasing internationally. There was a desire to colonize the rest of the world as countries like UK realized we cannot compete. We cannot compete with this now behemoth of the US that has much more land than we could ever have, more resources, more people. We can't compete, and we need to compete if we're going to survive. And so you really saw a ramping up of colonization efforts here in the mid 1800s to the end of the 1800s. This protectionism led to trade wars, which ultimately led to the two world wars. Okay, so moving into the 20th century, this continuing practice of what was supposed to be free trade, what was supposed to be liberalism and integrating markets, we went through this greedy phase where we realized, I don't know that I need you. Again, very much harkening back to a realist perspective. I don't know that I need you, UK. I can shut my borders to trade, protect myself, grow myself, and not really feel the loss of you. And so this became a big challenge for the relationships within the international system during this international economy era. That, yeah, we had internationalizing economies, but there was kind of the bubble burst at a certain point, and we went back to kind of a return to a little bit more national economy model, which led to ultimately two world wars. Okay, so Marxism at the same time was emerging across a number of states as a reaction to this, as a reaction to, hey guys, this free trade thing isn't working, especially if you're going to go about it the way that you are, which is not actually super free trade. You're blocking a lot of people out of this process, entire states out of this process, and this isn't working for us the way that we expected it to. We need to try a different way. Okay, so at the end of World War II in particular, you had this reflection where states around the world were saying, you know what, these wars were largely a response to the trade wars that we created, the economic discrimination between states that we created, and that if we don't adjust our model, this is going to happen again. So a couple of realizations came forward here. We had not only this idea that, okay, if we truly liberalized international trade, if we really did it, it could promote international peace. We've talked about this before in the liberalism lecture, democratic peace theory, going back to Immanuel Kant, right? If we did it for real and really committed to it, we could see peace in our time. Okay, so that was the first realization they had of, we can't do this again. We can't keep doing this. We can't have a World War III. So we need to invest in this. We need to take this seriously, really find a way to do this right so that we can promote international peace. One of the things that came out of this then, we've talked about in previous lectures, is the idea that we have got to establish IOs, real IOs, powerful IOs that can help us promote this liberal economic order, even if states decide 5 years from now, 10 years from now, that they don't want to participate. We need IOs strong enough to box us all in and keep us on target, keep us on track. So through the Bretton Woods system, Bretton Woods is a convention that happened, a World Economic kind of summit in New Hampshire. They established the IMF. They established the World Bank. We just talked about these in our IO lecture. Later on, things like GATT, the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trades, now the World Trade Organization, all of these IOs emerged largely out of response to states realizing from the First and Second World Wars, something has got to give, something has got to change. We have to commit to this or else we will fall right back into the trap that we have been in of trade war and economic discrimination leading to all-out violent conflict. Okay, so I'm going to stop there, and we're going to do, our next lecture is going to dive into that third era, the era we are currently in, the global economic era. All right, so don't forget to go online, do your Canvas quiz. Let me know if you have any questions, any comments, any concerns. Email me, comment down below in the video. And I hope you all are doing great. I hope you're having a great time. I know this is not what any of us expected. Please, please be in touch if you are needing anything from me. All right, have a great day.